Greetings, insiders. Today's March 27th, and I have another amazing marketing story that you need to know about. This week, we're breaking down how beverage brands are winning with Gen Z through identity marketing and what all brands can learn from it. This is Ad Age Insider, taking you behind the scenes of the industry's biggest stories with the reporters who actually wrote them. I'm your host, Parker Heron. Make sure to hit like and follow Ad Age wherever you're watching right now so that you're never behind on industry news. The brands that are winning right now with young consumers seem to have a few things in common. One would be really shrewd social media listening skills. Another would be the ability to turn communities and organic engagement into brand moments. And perhaps most importantly would be a really strong identity for the brand. That's so that someone carrying that product around down the street, showing it off in a social post, or even maybe dangling it from a bag on a keychain, can be proud to be personally using that product. These days, branding is all about signals and association, and the beverage category has some key examples of how to pull off that type of marketing successfully. So today, I have Ad Age's beverage expert on. Senior marketing reporter Jon Springer is going to take us through two trends that he's written about recently. One is how beverages are tapping into the power of expression to win with Gen Z. Another is on how some beverage brands are using their packaging and design to send those signals themselves, and how both of those stories intersect. Plus, how all brands, not just beverages, can apply those ideas to their strategy. So let's get into it. Jon, it's so great to have you back.
Well, thanks, Parker. It's glad to be here.
Amazing. And I'm glad that it's just the two of us. You know, that Tim Nudd, he can be a real chatterbox.
He's got a lot of great insights too. I can't compete.
Oh, that is just so not true. You can, of course, but all love and respect to Tim, of course. I'm glad that we're here, though, because, Jon, you have really been prolific in your documentation of how beverage marketing has been evolving. And as I mentioned in this episode's intro, we're going to dig deep into some of the nuts and bolts of the category trends you've been identifying, and then maybe even reveal a few things that could apply to all brands as well, not just beverages. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Amazing. So one story you wrote recently that I really enjoyed, it was part of our next gen marketing playbook package. That story was all about beverages as social badges. So give me a quick rundown of what you mean by that, what that trend is.
Yeah, well, beverages as a social badge is a term that goes back decades, where it basically describes how a person's beverage choice says a lot about them. And so if you are in a bar with a Heineken, you are a Heineken person, the brand attributes associated with them are kind of passed on to you. So, I mean, that's been the case for a long time with beverage, and that's undergoing a lot of change with the new generation and fragmented media.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how so? How is it different for these youngins?
Yeah, well, the youngins, there's a couple of things going on. One, there's been, in the industry, a tremendous explosion of products and, different stratospheres of products throughout the beverage world. But the most important thing has been, social media revolution, where people are pictured on social media with their beverages. And, in the old days, you could, assert your badge value with a beverage while walking into a bar, and that's about it.
Mm.
Now you can do so in the middle of the day. People see it in their algorithms. It shows up everywhere, and that has implications for the brand and for the people.
Yeah, so it's kind of like on my desk, I have my Stanley Love Shack Fancy collab cup. I like to show it off. It's nice. I have my iced coffee. I'm gay, I guess. That is the message. So people are like kind of showing in their, you're saying social posts, like I have beverages and here's why, or maybe they're taking their Stanley to school or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the Stanley is really interesting because it's not a beverage, it's a vessel, right? And so, it goes beyond sort of, you know, defeats the purpose of actually having a beverage in there almost. It could be water, it could be milk, it could be Coca-Cola, it could be Poppi, could be your iced coffee, whatever, right? But the the container itself holds a value. What I was thinking about when I was talking about sort of how people are posting their videos with beverages could be, a fitness influencer that has an Alani Nu can, or actual, brand posts or whatever that sort of help to broadcast the message for the brand, but also says a lot about the person who is making the video.
Mhm. So when you've done your reporting on this story, I mean, is this trend like just a social thing, a social media thing? Is that why this has evolved in this way? Or is there any kind of broader target that marketers have in identifying this as a place to tap in and connect with Gen Z?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of, the person from I spoke to from Coca-Cola made a great point in that article where they revived marketing for Diet Coke behind what they saw people doing online. So it illustrates how social media has sort of become the tail that wags the dog in terms of sort of marketing for a lot of these brands. And the Coca-Cola stuff was really interesting. There was an influencer who was talking about crispy Diet Coke. I don't know if you've seen any of these, Parker, but they're kind of funny. The type of ice people are comparing the quality of a Diet Coke they get from McDonald's versus Burger King. All these kinds of things. And Coca-Cola, to their credit, saw that and made marketing around it using the same language that they came from these social posts.
Yeah, and it's similar to, I guess, what we saw with, like you mentioned, Dr. Pepper. Like somebody on social made that jingle. Dr. Pepper picked up the jingle, made it official, and collaborated with that partnership, and it got a lot of attention. And so I guess then, it probably was a lot more trendy to have a Dr. Pepper in hand in your videos after that went viral. What are other kind of gold standards of how the brands you cover are tapping into this trend and finding some success, doing something different?
The obvious answer is Poppi. They really are credited, and fairly so, for, having developed an audience almost entirely online, using, packaging cues and influencer campaigns with the right audiences. And they got people to sort of become advocates for the brand and became so huge that Pepsi ended up buying them for $2 billion. This was a brand that, barely existed 5 years before, and they're doing Super Bowl ads. They're doing all this generated from this idea that they could cultivate a fan base on social media.
Yeah. Well, and Poppy is doing a number on my wallet because those little packs are quite expensive.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the story too. If you have value online, that can go into support a higher price.
Yeah. So I wonder, the things that we've talked about is how these beverage brands are transforming and interacting in their strategy with social creators, and that consumers are using these products in a way that is, I guess, supporting this trend of wanting to be visible and show people who they are. It's similar to Labubus or fashion trends where, maybe a beverage, you can come and go with different ones throughout the day, like you said, but people want to really be expressive right now in culture about who they are and what you can expect from them. And I thought there was a really interesting comparison here to another story that you wrote. You wrote a story about what's called hard hydration. And just like this last story, I'll have the full thing linked in this episode's description so everyone can go read it. But it's a way that brands are doing the opposite, trying to use package design and product design to signal to consumers what they are. But before I fill your head with all of my ideas, give us a quick rundown of what this hard hydration trend is.
Sure, it's basically alcoholic drinks that resemble Gatorade, and there's reasons behind that, and I could get into that if you want.
Yeah, yeah, say it.
So yeah, so I mean, that trend follows, the explosive thing in ready to drink cocktails are lemonades and iced teas right now. And it's been so for the last couple of years, kind of blowing up. And, these products, the idea is that, iced teas and lemonades come out of the, convenience store cooler doors. And what else comes out of convenience store cooler doors? And can we make that an alcoholic beverage? And so a bunch of brands have now taken on, in the last 2 years, really, taken on this idea of making vodka and fruit juice or whatever that sort of again resembles a Gatorade. It tastes like a Gatorade, flat, fruit flavored, comes in blue. All the sort of elements of a Gatorade, and the idea that it's easy drinking RTDs for kids, young adults.
Yeah, yes, not kids. What's interesting is that there are literal federal regulations on what these alcohol brands can and cannot say on their packaging about what they are. And a lot of the elements of what a Gatorade would say on their packaging, they provide to a drinker. These hard beverages cannot say. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So there's a lot of limits put on them by the Tax and Trade Bureau called the TTB, that sort of governs what they can or can't say on labels. One of the guys I spoke to in the article said they want you to shoot from 10 feet behind the line so that you can't even approach what they will allow you to say. So they can't use the word hydration. They can't use the word electrolytes. They can't use isotonic. There's some other words that are forbidden. So it's got to be
Ooh,
visual cues.
isotonic.
Yeah, isotonic. It's I don't know what isotonic is myself.
Yeah, that sounds like a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, exactly. But they can't use these terms, and so they have to use visual cues. So there's a brand called Light Strike that uses a plastic bottle that really resembles the kind of bottle that these drinks come from. These other guys kind of they talk the flavor and the colors are really strong indicators. I like that they all have blue. Blue is like this thing. It's kind of unique to Gatorade or to the sports drink category.
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, and maybe you tell me if I'm stretching too much on this, but I thought it was so interesting the way that social is transforming the way that some of these beverage brands are marketing to consumers by, wanting to have this identity signal. And then on the flip side, these brands are trying to literally in their package design signal to consumers like, you know what we are. We can't say it, but like, you know, come have your hard Gatorade. And so I wondered, same question as before, is this changing the way that beverage marketers are actually approaching marketing? Like, this isn't traditional marketing in that sense. It is like literally in the package design, they're trying to do a lot of talking through what they're putting on the shelves. I guess is that am I like making something up here, or is that something that's actually on the rise?
No, it's probably on the rise, but I don't want to say that it's new, right? And the packaging and the design of these cans, you know, it's been sort of part of the beverage world forever, because it's a visible thing. It's what you hold in your hand, whatever. So, and that's always been a part of it. I think one of the things that one of the people we said in that part of the article was that brands like Poppi and Alani Nu have really put a lot of work into the design that looks good online versus the old that may be optimized to look good on shelf. So that's something that has changed, I would say a little bit. Um, but design and branding and cues and all those things have I think have been part of all consumer packaged goods forever, at least back to the 50s.
Yeah, and another element of this is these brands are also doing quite a bit of social listening, like we said in the first story you wrote. And there are beverages that are trending on social that some of these are based off of. What was one? There was one that was basically a Gatorade vodka beverage that is trendy that some of these are kind of riffing on. Remind me what that was.
Well, well, Parker, there's the water hazard, which is a drink that originated on golf courses where people from bar carts were mixing Gatorade, vodka, Sprite, and I forget the last ingredient, but that was a behavior that was out in the wild that these brands kind of took notice of and then operationalized, put it in a can, and kind of followed those trends. And we've seen that happen in a lot of categories. I think for example, the Malibu and Dole, which is a new combination. I think that sort of mimics a drink that people were making at home. They put it in a can.
Yeah, you also mentioned in your article, the Borg or Blackout Rage Gallon, and I imagine that one originated at Jon Springer parties.
Yeah, no, Parker Heron University, I think, was the origin of that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's actually the 3rd beverage I had on my desk, I just didn't wanna say it earlier. Big
You
gallon
have a
of
board?
Borg. Yeah. I wonder too how much these products based around trends are doing great now maybe, but up against, challenges ahead. I know I've seen lots of protein drinks, hit the market, not in the sense that, like, obviously, like, a post-workout drink has been a thing for a long time, but you know what I'm talking about. There's been this big protein craze, and we're seeing like protein lattes and protein martinis and all sorts of things. And I wonder, like, if you're a brand who is fully formed against one of these trends, that seems to pose like a particular challenge if you're thinking about the longevity of a brand.
Yeah, yeah. I did a Ad Age podcast with a protein soda brand just recently.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. I'm not sure I have the answer, and I'm not sure the brands have the answers either. I mean, I'm thinking of in the alcohol space, like White Claw and some of these earlier seltzers had a nice, had a huge early run and then a kind of a gradual decline as sort of the other brands come up behind, like I was just talking about before. So, I think you need obviously a strong brand and people need to believe in you and you need to stand for something that is sustainable in order to be a sustainable brand. I think consumers can see through a lot of these things that are can smell a lot of things that are too trendy. And they know when a product is ripping off another product and so an authentic brand base is sort of, I guess table stakes for success in the beverage industry.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. That I feel like that could be like words of wisdom for many brands, not just beverage brands. I wonder if you had to distill the things that we've talked about today into a couple of tips or things that you see brands doing on your beat that are proving successful that any marketer, whether a beverage or not, could take away from listening to this.
Brands need to keep an eye on what consumers are saying. And in some cases, like Dr. Pepper, we talked about, or Diet Coke, find a way to incorporate that into their own marketing message to sort of deliver this signal that they are listening to their consumers. I think brands also have to sort of be proactive online themselves and see if they can find not just loyal people, but sort of fans who can speak to them, who can advocate for them and sort of be their allies as rather than just kind of showing their product or being a part of that. So fanship is important. Kind of listening is important. Being aware of the fact that when your brand is out there in the hands of people and they're using it as badges, you really don't have control over the brand. It could be,
Mm.
you are the brand is sort of surrendered to the people that are using it. And so, to the degree that you can keep an eye on sort of what's going on with that and be comfortable with that being a part of your world, I think is important as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I love what you were saying is seeing some of these brand resurgences, brands who like find these things and come back up. I'm thinking about like Gap has really remade itself recently by following some of the things I think that you've said, and I think that's really interesting. Sprite just did a big rebrand. I'm curious to see how that plays out because I see a lot of interesting cues in why they did that rebrand. But John, before you leave us and we all are sad to not have you in our ears anymore, what are some other trends that you're seeing in the beverage space that are exciting you right now?
Well, I'm at work right now on a summer drinking trends piece, and I've uncovered any number of things and it'll publish very soon in Ad Age. I may have published by the time we go on air. Low ABV, so half strength beers. That's kind of interesting. These are beers that are about half the alcohol content of a light beer, so 2.9% or whatever. Dad Strength brand. Drink a few of them, drink more of them, take it easy, don't get wasted.
Well, John, you are just a fountain of knowledge. I am so excited that we had this conversation, and people should follow along your coverage, follow along with your coverage on adage.com because you just are like turning these things out that are so insightful and get me excited about some marketing takeaways when I read them. So thank you so much for joining on today, Jon. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Parker. It was a lot of fun.
All right. I hope you found that conversation as fun as I did. If you enjoyed it, please like this video and subscribe to Ad Age wherever you're watching right now. I want to thank my guest, Jon Springer, and I want to thank you for watching. I'm Parker Heron, and this is Ad Age Insider. Enjoy your day.